For the next phase of the game, we're going to go ahead and deal with score. So how does score happen? Well, it happens when we pass between the two tubes. And really it's kind of when we pass on the later side of the tubes. We want to make sure we actually kind of get through. But we want to be able to pass through. And when we pass through, we need to, of course, update our score. So this pass-through element, we can use a trigger. Now you might think a collider, but remember a collider, we hit things. So a trigger lets us pass through and kind of perform the same things that a collision event will happen. And if you remember, with Space Invaders, we use the on-trigger-enter method, which is what we will use here. The first step we're going to do is we're actually going to modify our tube series to have that trigger. So this is the good reason why we have these prefabs. If I didn't have these prefabs, then I would actually have to go in and set up a trigger on each of these. And I have to go in, and if you had 20 of them or 15 of them, you have to go in and manually, modify all those. And that's kind of a headache. So instead, what we're going to do is we're going to leave all our tubes alone that we have, but drag out a copy of the prefab. This way, when I make changes to this and I save them, it should update these, but not update all the sizes. Because right now, if I click on the original tube and adjust the size and hit apply, all these tubes are gonna, the sizing and the positioning and everything, like these bottom tubes are actually going to be pulled down. So we don't want that to happen. So we're going to deal with an original tube here. Well, the easiest thing to do is we need to add our trigger. So the easiest thing to do here is to just take our parent object and add a component, physics 2D, and the box collider. Now notice the box collider is right in the middle. We want that to be long and skinny and kind of over here on the right side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to deal with the offset and the size elements of the box collider on this side. I'm going to drag out the Y so that it kind of overlaps like this. And then since I want to move it horizontally, I need to modify the X. And I'm going to move it to the front, something like that. Maybe I'll make it a little skinnier. It's up to you how you want to make it. Maybe I'll make it something like that and move it right to the front like this. So you kind of have to pass through the tube and not collide with the top or bottom and actually get through the tube to get that point. Okay, with this, then I'm eventually later on going to be using a tag, and that tag is going to check what we trigger through. And in our case, it's going to be a tube. So the tag here, we need to add 1 to our growing list, and I'm going to call it tube. Okay. Now you can call it whatever you want, score area. But the nice thing with this tube is I can actually use it in a couple places. We're going to use it. I can use it when we collide with the tubes itself or with the trigger. And we'll eventually do that when we need to restart the game. So with this main tube object, I'm going to go and tag it as tube. And as you notice, hopefully, things are kind of going dark or bold. So the text for tag is bold. The collision is bold. The position rotation are all bolded. What this means is it means that we have a prefab connected, and as you can see, it's right here. We can select, revert, or apply, but these settings aren't saved to the original prefab. So this always kind of nicely tells you when it's bolded text that, hey, this is not the original. So what we want to do, though, is we want to make it the original. So since I made changes to this original prefab object, this copy of the original with all the original settings, I'm just going to hit this apply button up here. And what this apply button does is it makes everything not bold. And now when I click on all my tubes, as you can see, there is a collider on them. If I roll through them all on the inspector over here, the collider is all there, the tag is all there. So we want to make sure that we hit the apply button, right, on that prefab to save those settings. But this is this is a good example to show you that, as you can see, I made a change to the prefab, I hit apply, and now all the prefabs have made that change for me. So I only had to do one prefab compared to 15 changes. All right, so I'm going to command delete it because I don't need that copy anymore because I have that tube. Let's go ahead and open up our bird script. And this is where we can deal with the trigger. So the trigger is going to be our void on trigger enter 2D. And we need a collider 2D variable. And I'll just call it OBJ. And basically with that OBJ, we need to say dot, we need to check the tag. So if obj.tag is equal to tube. And now I'm using my tube tag again. So now if you use a lowercase t on your tube when you did it in Unity, you got to use your lowercase tube. You got to spell it however you spelt it. Or if you said score zone, you could call it score zone. So what do we want to do? Well, with this tag, we want to add to scores. So let's say score plus plus. And I don't have a score variable, so I need to come up here. And I can say public int score is equal to 0. I will eventually need the UI component then after I add score. So what I'm going to do is, just like we had in the other games, at the top say using Unity engine.ui, and then I need to update that UI every time I update the score. So I'm going to say public text component score GUI, and with this I can take that variable and come down here and say score GUI dot text is equal to score dot to string. And that's it for the score. It should work. Come over here, make sure it compiles so we don't have any errors. Now, with the bird, I have a score variable right here. It's score 0. But it's going to give me an error because it's going to say null reference score GUI is not set to an object. So let's make our GUI real quick. Our GUI is going to be game object, UI, and a text component. And if we zoom out here, there's our canvas, right? And here's our text component. And we'll size this up. We'll put it in 0. I'll size it to like 50. Maybe it's 100. There we go. Make it centered because 0, 0, 0. Make sure I can put like 3 or 2 zeros pretty much because we only have 15 tubes. But normally you might want to think about another color. Be black. But normally you'd want to think about like how many zeros can I fit in there, because so I know what score I'm going to get. In my case, I want to make sure my top score is 15, and Flappy Bird, it was like what, 99 or 999, whatever it was. Also with the canvas, remember we want our scalar mode, so we want to set it to scale with screen size. It might adjust your text, so I would actually do the scaling first if you haven't already. I'm going to buff it down a little bit. And then with the bird, since this is going to be really my only text object here, I'm going to attach the text. So I'm going to hit play, and now I'm going to try to go through. Oh, forgot to make the prefabs a trigger. So on here, while I added a collider to all these, I needed to say is trigger. So instead of again changing this 1, I can actually just click on the prefab, click on the tube here, and check is trigger. Save it if you need to. You can, yes, make some changes right on here, but sometimes it's easier to drag out, make some changes and save. But with this simple little check on this prefab, I can, modify my prefab in here. Kind of prepare myself here. All right, my score is working.